Today on Taste of Magic, we are finishing our discussion of the playing cards from Shards of Alara block, or the Plane of Alara. We talked about the four planes, Bant, Grixis, Jund, and Naya in the other episode. This episode, there's only one left. I'm going to be talking about the Maelstrom. The Maelstrom, when you planeswalk to it, or when, at the beginning of your upkeep, you can reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a permanent, you can put it into play for free. Then, if you roll the Chaos die, you can put a permanent from your graveyard into play. This effect is a little similar, but not really like the cascade effect that they had in Alara Reborn. And cascade was a multicolor keyword that appeared on 10 spells originally, and there are some new spells in the new cards. The Maelstrom is also the place where all 5 of the shards were being brought together by Nicobolus in an event called the Conflux. The way it works is Alara, the whole plane of Alara, in some ancient forgotten time, was broken apart by a planeswalker and sucked out a lot of the mana, which caused it to break apart. Now we have Nicobolus, who wants to harness the power from all these planes for himself, and he is combining them in what's called the Conflux. In the card Conflux, you can actually see his hand, and there's some flavor text by him. And he is combining them all so that he can harness their power and regain his godlike power that he had. Planeswalkers in old Magic lore, pre-Time Spiral, basically were pretty much gods. They could not be stopped. They had just absurd amounts of power. They could create planes. They could do whatever they want. They were unkillable, pretty much. But Wizards of the Coast decided that that was not really interesting to have from a story point of view. If you had characters that could not be killed, I mean, even Urza, who was the original planeswalker that the stories were about, he got his head chopped off, and he still was alive for a little while. So that's just not interesting from a storytelling perspective. So in the events of Time Spiral block, the Planeswalker spark was changed, and Planeswalkers now were not nigh omnipotent and could actually die. But Nicobolus, who had been a Planeswalker since the very beginning, he's the oldest Planeswalker that's still around, he obviously did not want to lose all his power, so he was trying to come up with some way of regaining all that power, which led to the events of Shards of Alara block. At the end of Shards of Alara, Ajani fights Nicobolus at the Maelstrom and ultimately wins by creating a giant avatar, which he can do in his original Planeswalker card, the one from Lorwyn. And Nicobolus retreats, but he's not ultimately defeated, but he did not get all the power that he wanted. Ajani goes home to his home plane of Naya, well, the section of Alara that's still kind of Naya, and then ultimately he planeswalks away too. There were a couple other planeswalkers on the plane of Alara. Elspeth was on the plane of Bant, and she really liked Bant because it reminded her of her homeland, or her home plane, before the Phyrexians had destroyed it, and she got really upset when Alara was remade. She felt it wasn't Bant anymore, Bant was destroyed. She kind of got all whiny about it and just left. She didn't even really help Ajani all that much. Another planeswalker was Sarkin Vol, who he was the Jund-themed planeswalker. He was from another plane where he was a warlord and a shaman that worshipped dragons, but on his home plane, dragons were hunted nearly to extinction. So he started planeswalking around trying to find the ultimate dragon. And when he stumbled onto Jund, he was a big fan because there was lots of dragons there. And he ended up meeting Ajani after Ajani's first planeswalk and kind of taught Ajani what it meant to be a planeswalker. Ultimately, Sarkin Vol met Nicobolus, and in Sarkin Vol's eyes, Nicobolus was the ultimate dragon, and he instantly pled his allegiance to him. And from there, he kind of became a bad guy. Before, he was just kind of not really a bad guy. He was just kind of a crazy guy. He just didn't really. He did whatever he wanted to and fought dragons and fought whoever was there. Then, of course, in Esper, the planeswalker was Tezzeret. Tezzeret didn't really have anything to do with the storyline in Shards of Alara, but he is from the plane of Esper, as you can see from his Ethereum arm in his picture. And later he shows up in Scars of Mirrodin block as Tezzeret, Agent of Bolus, so you know he's working for Nicobolus. Tezzeret also has some history with Jace Balaran. The two of them worked together at one point. And so those are all the planeswalkers, and also Nicobolus obviously showed up, and he was associated with Grixis because of his colors, and he was there trying to destroy Alara, or bring it back together. He didn't really care if it was destroyed, he just wanted to harness the power. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the new cards from the two Planechase decks. The two Alara themed decks are Primordial Hunger and Chaos Reigns. Each of them have one of the keywords from Alara. Primordial Hunger has Devour. It has a new legendary Devour creature called Thraumok the Insatiable, who has Devour X, which allows him to devour X creatures and get X +1/+1 counters for each creature. So that's pretty neat. That's the biggest Devour creature we've seen so far. There's also the Prey Caesar Dragon, who has Devour 2, but whenever he attacks, he deals X damage, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on him to target creature or player. So that's another one that's pretty cool. Another card that does not have a Devour, but is a new card, is called the Dragon Lair Spider. And whenever your opponent casts a spell, you get a 1/1 insect. That one's kind of interesting. That'll help fuel your Devour cards. So the other keyword that they brought back is Cascade. The big legendary Cascade creature is the Maelstrom Wanderer, who gives all your creatures haste, and he has Cascade twice, which is pretty cool. You get 2 free spells off of him, and if they're creatures, you can attack with those creatures right away. So that's pretty neat. There's 2 more Cascade cards. There's the Shardless Agent, who only costs 3 mana, which she is green and blue. And then there's also the Ethereum Horn Sorcerer, who's a Minotaur, who is blue and red. Now, this is kind of interesting because in Shards of Alara, the color combinations were all friendly. So here we see with the Maelstrom Wanderer, there is a blue, red, and green combination, which is blue, and it's 2 enemy colors. And then we have 2 enemy pairings with 2 other Cascade cards. Once again, I'm going long, so I'm going to end the episode here. I have a little bit more where I talk about enemy colors. Feel free to watch, and I'll see you next episode.